500 years ago, he washed ashore the sole survivor of a shipwreck. And upon the skull of the man who killed his dad, he said, "I'm mad, I must eradicate piracy, injustice and cruelty, and all my sons will follow me, so evildoers will believe that this man cannot die."
The Phantom,
The ghost who walks,
the Phantom,
enemies beware, the Phantom's always there, but you won't find the Phantom. He finds you.
G'day everybody, and for those who have come in late, you're listening to Expand the Phantom podcast. This is episode 128, Comics and News for September. My name is Jermayn, and tonight I'm joined by Dan. How are you, buddy?
Fantastic, Jerm. Very, very good. It's a Tuesday night that we're recording tonight, which is a bit unusual, but school holidays coming up.
Tuesdays.
Hey?
I don't think we've done many Tuesdays before.
No, but as I say, school holidays coming up, and we just don't know where we'll be over the next little while. We've lost one of our team to Ireland. You're going to go overseas at some point before the end of the month as well. Just record when we can.
That's it. And our comics and news, and to be honest, we've been a little bit tardy with these, so we're going to try and keep it tight. So without too much dribble, and let's get straight into it.
Well, there's not a lot of news, so hopefully that...
So first of all, let's talk about publishing news. So actually, hang on, I'll backtrack a little bit. This isn't on the run sheet.
No, already.
Already. So just a quick note that if you are interested in going to Adelaide or Brisbane to see Billy Zane, the tokens to be able to get your autographs and your signatures are on sale. So I'm not sure what the limit is, but by the time this goes out, they'll probably still be on sale. So if you're needing a signature and stuff like that, you better go buy it now. So we'll just do that as a general shout out. We have put that on Facebook as well.
Yep.
Okay, so then we'll get into the publisher news. So we'll talk about Frew, and we have already done a podcast on this, but which was episode 127, and you can listen to that, which was a very interesting discussion.
Is that literally just the last podcast?
Yes, it was.
As published. Well,
yeah.
I'm all over.
We've recorded two in the meantime.
Yeah.
But from the numbers as it actually comes out, it will be the next one. Okay. So we've talked about the Kid Phantom cancellation, episode 127. Since that, there has been a Frew announcement, I guess you would call it, or a little tidbit, that there is going to still be 2 magazines to come.
Have they announced that, or have they just told us?
Yeah, no, they have announced it.
Is that in the comic?
No. It was,
you keep talking, I've got to let my dog in.
On a face. And then also in issue 1848, which is the one that I'm holding up now, which is The Man on the Zebra, Guardian of the Eastern Dark, Part 1. It also was announced, just to quote, it says in issue 1848, message to the publisher, it is our intention to continue publishing Fans World, possibly Kid Phantom, blah, blah, blah. And then on the last Friday of recording, which would have been, what was the date last Friday as recording?
13th.
Bear with me while I pull up my calendar. Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
There was a quick post from Frew just to say that they are still going to be doing 2 issues. So from what we've been told, issue 9 will be prior to Christmas, and then issue 10 will most likely be early next year.
Oh,
and then
I misread that. I thought that 10 was coming out as some sort of Christmas special.
Well, it could be, but I don't know. From what I understand, issue 9 will be out before Christmas, which is only a couple of months away, and then you're looking at probably issue 10, which will be early next year, probably like a New Year's special or something like that. And then there is a promise, well, not a promise, but there might be, most likely, probably be something extra in between, which, if you listen to the interview with Andrew and Paul, which goes directly after our initial discussions on the cancellation, they do kind of talk a little bit about what it might be. So it is worth, I guess, having a listen to that if you haven't, even if you're not a fan of the Kid Phantom, just to kind of identify, and kind of see what might be coming. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but Dan, how are you feeling 2-3 weeks after the cancellation? How are you feeling now?
Oh,
still devastated.
I guess through the 7 stages of grief, I'm up to acceptance, I suppose. Still not delighted.
No,
but it is what it is. Can't do anything about it. It's just it's a little bit bittersweet to see the Kid Phantom posters that Paul Mason is posting up around the Brisbane CBD library. Obviously those were plans that he'd put in place shortly before he heard the news. He's the Oz Comic Con is this weekend as we're recording in Brisbane, and he's going to be there with Kid Phantom and
with a whip book as well,
work in progress books and that sort of stuff. So there's. He's still fighting the good fight in terms of publicising the book, and yet here on its last legs. So, I'm still sad to see it go. I know that there are other people who are delighted, which is a little bit sad. I think there are people who are openly dancing on the grave, sort of thing. I think that's a pretty sad way to spend your time.
It is, and like I said, that person don't let the door hit you on the way out.
I'm probably not as cold-hearted as that, because it takes all kinds. But I mean, the comment you're referring to there is someone who said that if Kid Phantom was to appear as the filler in the back of the regular issues, that they would stop buying the regular issues, which does seem like a really weird sort of a stance to take. Anyway. Takes all kinds. As long as most
it does, unfortunately.
Main thing.
And I think majority of fans are happy that we will continue to see it in one form or the other. So I think that's good. You can't please everyone, as Frew will have probably, or they would have figured out by now that you can't please everyone. So. Oh, well, unfortunately, there's not much we can do about it. We'll continue to fight the good fight. We'll continue to promote it. And then I'm looking forward to the story as it progresses. Doesn't mean that we're never going to see the end of it, which is good. So that's good. All right. So another piece of information that we have received from Frew. So huge thanks to Dudley and Glenn for this little tidbit, is that in October sometime, we're not quite sure what date, but we know it will be in October, there is going to be a Raymore reboot type of story. I'm not really sure why a reboot, but basically there's an artist who has created a Phantom story as a sequel to one of the previous Raymore stories. So we've seen this before in the Frew 70th? Anniversary, or the last anniversary special we got out.
The trade paperback.
We saw it in the trade paperback, but we also saw it in the issue which had Cy Barry on the cover as well.
Yeah.
So I think it was the 70th anniversary.
Yeah, that's right. Modern.
So you have something like that. If you're watching our YouTube, you can kind of see a sketch cover that Dan is pointing through. So you have a sequel story. And then you have a sequel story done up by modern artists in the
those
same
ones,
style.
We're not sure if the upcoming issue has got the original Raymore story in it as well.
That was one of the questions we had. So let's just back up a little bit. So the story is going to be Little Thomas, which is a daily story. It's the 4th daily story, I believe, that was ever created. The artist and the writer is going to be Matt Kyme, who, if you have listened to many of our podcasts, he has been a past guest when he was talking about his tribute parody comic called The Demon, which there's been a few dramas afterwards, but we won't get into that. During that podcast, we both asked him, would you like to do a Frew story? He said yes. 5 years later, it has happened.
5 years.
Which we're all fairly excited about. So, in getting back to your question, no, I don't think it'll be the same format where we'll get the original Little Tomer book story and then the sequel, because Little Tomer was last produced in a free comic in, when was it? Maybe, I think it was about 2 years ago.
I was going to say 4, but it's pretty recent.
It's pretty recent, and Dudley has made mention in the past that he likes a 20-year gap before he reproduces stories, because that's a generation who probably hasn't seen that story before. Yeah. So it's good news that we are going to see another Ray Moore sequel story, which we've seen previously with the one with the Return of the Cyberman, which was done by Andrew Constant and Jason Paulus. So I'm excited about this. What about you, Dan?
Well, the difference between that story by Constant and Paulus, which was entertaining, we really quite enjoyed that and gave it big raps when we reviewed the trade paperback. The difference with this one is that Matt Kyme is very true to and very good at replicating the art style of Ray Moore. And
he's closer, yeah.
Oh, much closer. Jason Paulus is a fantastic artist. He's nothing like Ray Moore. This is I could probably draw a stick figure that's closer to Ray Moore than what Jason Paulus's work is, which is absolutely no besmirching of Jason's work. It's completely different style. This is very much in the style of Ray Moore. Well, we've seen from Matt's writing when he was doing The Demon and what we understand of the story that he's gone and written here as the sequel to Little Tomer, he also writes very much in the style of books that were written at that time. I'm not saying he's, Lee Falk Take Two, but he certainly tried very hard to write in that same sort of style from that era. And I think that a lot of fans who pick this up and read through it are going to feel like it's a very familiar sort of a story that they've never read before, obviously, but that it's going to be pretty familiar to them, both visually and literarily, if you like. So we've spoken to Matt, just chatted via Messenger. He's very excited that it's coming. If you'd like to hear the episode that we chatted with him, that's episode number 69, which was back in July of 2017. So not quite 5 years ago, only a tick over 2.
It's only 2.5 years ago.
Not even 2.5.
Halfway off.
2 years and 2 months. You count like this, your kids will be getting their licenses by the middle of next year, mate.
No, but we'll just call it dog years then, eh? So, but no, it's exciting news. It's good news. I like the style. I like the elements that he's done with the Demon. I will admit, I've enjoyed his earlier Demon stories more than his rebranded Demon stories. The original ones, which had the Phantom elements, I enjoyed a lot as a Phantom fan. I'm a Phantom fan first and foremost. When I read his the rebranded version of it, I didn't enjoy it as much. So I think going on from that, I'm going to probably enjoy. I will probably enjoy this.
Yeah. I'm excited because I'm sure we said at the time.
Alrighty.
I'm sure we said at the time that he would be an artist that would be perfect to do a Ray Moore sequel. We were hopeful even that something like The Demon might appear in something like Giant Size. And I think we've seen with what Shane Foley's done that there's room for that sort of a story. It's a shame that all got off on the wrong foot or went the direction that it did, sliding doors and all the rest of it. But where one door shuts, a window opens, and it looks like Matt Kyme's got his foot in the window here, so to speak.
And he fulfills thousands of people's dreams, and that is to, in a sense, get paid to do the Phantom.
Yep.
So congratulations. We have talked about, when we review that story, that we will get him on to do a bit of a creative discussion as we review the story. So we've done that a couple of times in the past, so I'm looking forward to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on. I don't really know what to say about this. Lightning Strikes. Issues 3 and 4 have been released. They were released in the Dublin Comic Con, which was probably about a month ago. We've posted images of that to our Patreons. It hasn't been posted to the public yet. I'm not really sure why. We have been
by us or by
3
them?
and 4 have been sent out to Phantoms, or by them. Issues 3 and 4
I know why it
has
hasn't been done by us. We're too bloody busy.
Well, also, yeah, we only post stuff to the public when we get permission, and we haven't got permission, so we haven't published it or posted it. So, issues 3 and 4, which are the ones we've been talking about, have been sent out to Phantom's Vault, along with issues 1 and 2. At this stage, the only people that have issues 1 are the people that have been sent it to them from third parties, or issues 2 if you brought it from Jamie at Supernova, and he had 20 copies.
Those would be the only.
Looking at maybe 20 people in Australia.
In Australia, yeah, I'm sure there's certainly people in Scandinavia who have purchased it separately, and there's certainly people in America who we know that have got copies of issues and what.
And I've seen copies of 1 and 2 in Brazil and South America as well. So in Australia, we're a little bit forgotten, but we're used to that. So we've been talking with Owen. He's recommended buying issues 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 if you're still after it, either via Fan's Vault or via. There is a couple of other comic book shops. Kaboom Comics is one of them who's put an order in, and we believe there's 1 or 2 others as well. Basically, Owen has said it's not working getting them directly from him, so you're better off to go through Fan's Vault. In saying that, I do have an order on its way, and I do have a tracking number. So if you're wanting to get a tracking number so you can track it, so you can use that as an idea of basically when Phantom's Vault is going to get theirs, and whether that's going to go up on the Frew website or whatever, contact myself, and then we can go from there. But
can I ask, with using your tracking number, what does it tell you? Where's your parcel at?
To be honest, I haven't looked yet. I get into the habit of checking it every day, and it's rather distracting. So I just don't bother, and I just like the surprise when it comes. That's all we'll say with Lightning Strikes. I think what we'll do is when issues 3 and 4 come out and are readily available, we'll do probably a podcast on issues 1, 2, 3, and 4 together. But we won't do it until they're actually readily available for Australian listeners. Because in the past, so that's what we'll probably do with that. That's all we'll probably discuss regarding Lightning Strikes. When it comes closer, we'll go from there. Okay, the next point is we had our Patreon competition winner for the season of spring, which when it's spring because everyone's hay fever kicks in. So Callum was the winner of that book, and I don't have the book with me because I'm in my daughter's room instead of my
because you've already sent it to him?
Well, no, Callum actually only lives around the corner, a half-hour drive from me. So, and he's up away working, so when he finishes working, he can come with me, he can come to my place and get it. And the beauty about that is that he doesn't get the book until I get a photo of him holding the book. Because some of our last competition winners, no names need to be named, but they've been a little bit slacking in taking photos of them with the winnings. So congratulations to Callum. Good bloke, has been supporting us from the beginning. Next prize for summer, which will be December, is going to be some signed gallery cards. So what we're going to do is, we haven't decided on the number, but by then we'll probably have 15, maybe 20 signed gallery cards, and we're thinking maybe, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15, and basically you can choose which ones you want. So we've got ones from around the world, and we've got ones from Australia as well. So it's all pretty exciting. That's going to be our next one. And then we've got a couple of other prizes coming up as well, which you will find out as we announce them. Okay, now you've got a note here for KFS social media.
Yeah. Now
I have no idea what that is, so you can take over from here.
All right. I just I've been meaning to say for probably a couple of comics and news podcasts now, because I've noticed over the last 4 to 8 weeks, I suppose, that I assume it's King Features, but the official Phantom social media pages seem to be getting their act together. And I'm not huge. I'm not a I don't live on social media by any stretch of the imagination, and I often miss a lot of the things that are on Facebook, and you draw my attention to them and that sort of thing. But I visit Twitter, for instance, on a reasonably regular basis, and the Twitter account in particular is the one that sort of drew my attention to this. There's the Twitter account at the Phantom Comic, is the Phantom Official, and it has basically what they've done is they've stepped up their game in terms of putting at least one post on a day. They're kind of the corny ones from time to time with, the thank goodness it's Friday, and they have, with the PH, and they have a happy Phantom dancing or whatever. They'll have a, Monday again, and then the Phantom's shooting his way out of something or whatever. So there's those ones, but they also are posting up clips and little commentary from, so I'll just show you here. They're posting up clips and little commentary from the current Sundays or dailies, and you can't really see that on the screen, but I'm just sort of scrolling through their Twitter account. You can see they're putting lots of images up these days, lots of it from, there's one there. That's the Friday Bring It. And the Phantom really getting onto it. So I'm just impressed that someone at King Features, I think, is taking the Phantom on social media a little bit more seriously. Now that account only has what I just saw, only has 155 followers. So it's hardly gone viral at this stage. But I think it's a really good sign that someone is getting involved in the digital space.
Agree. Very good point. I remember, I think this was before your time on the podcast. So what would that be? DC before, or no, DF. Before, so BDF, before Dan Fraser, it was actually during a podcast. I think it was with Joe and Steve. I can't remember. It was, I don't want to say 5 years, but it was a while ago. We actually came across
anywhere
article,
between 20 minutes and 16 years ago.
There was actually an article where they were talking about they created a new marketing role, and one of them was to get to increase their social media presence. So it would have been, at least, you've been with us for what, 3.5 years?
Yeah, maybe. Yep, that's probably about right.
All right, so it will be at least 4 years ago. It was a long, long time ago. So, don't know why it's taken 4 years for that to actually happen, but I guess it's good news.
Yeah, and I'm very much not a big Instagram user, but I'm just now looking at to see if I can find a Phantom official account on Instagram. This is riveting live, I'm sure.
Where's Stephen and his snoring effects when you need it?
we'll patch him in. It's the middle of the day in Ireland. He could probably stay awake for these ones now.
Anyway, so no, it's good news. Good point you raised. Okay, so moving on. Now, this was a question or a point that was raised.
We've got to get sound effects for this.
But so basically, what's happened is Don Martin
You're not going with my monkey mail segment idea, are you? You're just going to just go straight into it. Where's the fun?
Oh, okay. All right. So what we'll do is we'll backtrack. So we'll go press reverse, and then we've gone in. So the new segment, which is going to be our monkey mail, and then we will cue in.
What is monkey
noises.
mail? What's the?
So there we go. There's our monkey's noises. Haven't quite got the sound of someone eating a banana yet. So basically, the monkey mail, for those who have come in late, is the form of the Phantom used to get his mail before he got broadband at the Skull Cave. So basically, someone would pick up a letter from the post office, deliver it, and then the monkey will take it from point A, which was little Thomas' house or whatever it was, to the Skull Cave. So that's where the idea of monkey mail came from, and we're pinching it because we are full of original ideas and we love lots of Phantom puns.
I've probably got a bit more respect for our listeners than that. People aren't going to be 20 minutes into a Phantom podcast if they don't know monkey mail. I wouldn't have thought. I meant, what is monkey mail to us?
Okay, so monkey mail to us, you can tell we actually discussed this prior, is basically when people can shoot us questions. Or statements. If you want to tell us how awesome we are, we'll read that out as well.
We haven't got any of those yet, oddly.
Yeah. I think the other ones we've ever got is, it's been 4 days and I'm still listening to the same podcast. What on earth? So this message or question is from a listener, follower, fan, with a PH, of course, called Don Martin. No PHs in that name. Okay, so this is his message. Hi, lads. Not sure if you've discussed this on the podcast, but I've noticed that when Frew do reprints these days, they include in the comic a cover from a previous printing. For example, with Black Glove, issue 1841, it included the cover of 898 and also 899. They've done it numerous times. What is this all about? It just seems really strange to me to essentially make the issue a replica of an issue that's not really that old. Sorry if this has been covered. Keen to hear your thoughts. Cheers. So from Don to Dan, what are your thoughts?
I don't mind it. When Don says, not really that old, as you said earlier, Dudley does have a bit of a policy of that 20-year gap at the moment. And we're talking about issue 898 being redone in issue 1841. So it's 950 issues later.
Yeah.
It's entirely likely that there'll be lots of fans who have not seen the cover of the 890s, because while you and I, Germ, and quite a number of people who listen to this podcast might well have that issue, and it's not that expensive to pick up on eBay or difficult to find. Lots of people are not as avidly collecting as that, and there are lots of more casual fans who won't have seen it. And so I think for those fans, it's I would think that it's interesting to. It's not like that is the cover, and it's entirely a replica, like what we've seen in the replica series that and I'm talking now about the ones that came with the annuals. They genuinely are entirely a replica from front cover to back cover. Black Glove, for instance, was repackaged with Jeff Weigel's cover. It was repackaged as a double issue rather than the two singles. And so I think there's the general interest there for it to have the colour versions of the original covers inside. So I quite like it.
Yeah. I must admit, I'm kind of on the fence with this one. I'm going to do a Steve. I understand why to include it, because one, it's easy. Two, it's you have to fill it with something else. And it does have that novelty in the sense that, it is a cool pin-up of an old school cover. Everyone loves those type of covers. The point that I think I probably see where Don's coming from is, as a old time reader, would prefer to see a 2-page article on, say, George Bess, or I think George Bess was the artist of that, or on the writer, or something about history. And we see that in Giant Size, and we saw it in another issue just recently, which I can't remember. Oh,
the Phantom Adventures book you're thinking.
Yeah, the Legacy issue as well, where we kind of got some information. So from a newer reader, I understand why they've done it, and it's cool and stuff. But from someone who's an old fart collector, I would prefer to see something along the lines of that. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to lose any sleep if it's not in there.
No, whereas as I said, I quite like it. Whether it's an easy option, I'm not sure that that's necessarily fair of you to say.
Probably not, but it would have got people either disagreeing with me or agreeing with me.
Yeah. It certainly is more. I guess less time consuming than research, writing an article on the author or the artist or whatever.
Yes.
As informative as that might be,
and I guess
there's two audiences, I suppose.
Would have actually added any value?
Yeah, that's right. There's two audiences, and the old farts, for want of a better name, may well be one who would enjoy reading that sort of stuff. But the casual readers who are just picking up comics for the first time and just want to read a comic book and aren't after more than that, I think it's a nice little pin-up, like you say, and lets people know what it was like 20 years ago.
Yes. All right. So, Don, I hope that answered your question. If anyone else has any other questions or points that you want us to raise from Frew Comics or anything else and stuff like that, which we haven't done before, shoot us a message. Hopefully we'll come up with some better monkey noises and
that's it. That's that's the sting for all of our monkey mail from here on in. So,
well, me being an idiot and scratching my underarm and making a poor monkey noise.
Absolutely.
What's that song? There's a Wiggles song.
Mash banana.
The monkey man. That's what actually.
Oh, monkey man.
Yeah. We should do. We should do. Yeah. Everyone who's got kids just went, oh no. My youngest has discovered Wiggles recently. Okay, so moving on to some comics, which I think we're actually doing all right for time at the moment. So we're gonna stick with Frew. So we've got, what have we got? We got 6 comics, including the hardcover collection, and then we have 4 comics for Egmont, and Mikkel has done a video review of those as well. So if you are listening to the podcast,
have you already listened to or seen Mikkel's video audio to know how long it is?
It's maybe 5-10 minutes all up.
All right, Mikkel, challenge accepted.
Are we talking about 5-10 minutes for our 6 stories or for each one?
Oh, for each one. For each of us on each of the comics.
No, we won't be that long. We'll try not to be anyway. So, in advance, thank you, Mikkel. If you are listening to it on the podcast and you want to basically see Mikkel thumbing through the comics on the video, we will have it timestamped when the Egmont comics are being reviewed. So that way, if you don't want to listen to the Frew comics and look at our ugly mugs and you'd rather look at some comics, you can do that as well. Okay, so first up, we are going to review Frew 1848, which is a cover from Grange Wallace. No, 1844, sorry. Yeah. Which is a cover from Grange Wallace. The stories inside is The Slaves by Magnus Knutson and Jamie Val. And then it's also got Fantomen by Gaslight, episode 8 by Glenn Lumsden and Jason Paulos. So what we'll do is we'll discuss all the Gaslight issues at the end.
Yep.
and then we'll also do the Hard Darkness one as well. So, do you want to get us started on the story of the slaves?
Yeah, and we won't spend too long talking about the cover because while we like it, the next episode of the podcast is going to be a big conversation with Grange Wallace, and we talk extensively about his covers there. So don't feel like we're skipping over this. We're actually giving it way more time in episode 129, which will hopefully coincide with Grange's 4th cover, which is due before the end of September. So hold out for that one.
Good
All
point.
right. Now, my review of the slaves. Now, this is an interesting one. I found, as soon as I realised this was the Magnus Knudsen story, I was really interested because we've just spoken to him on the podcast not that long ago, and I felt quite ignorant in that podcast because I didn't know what I was talking about, really. I hadn't read many of his stories. So,
isn't that a common occurrence for you on the podcast, mate?
Well, sometimes. That's a two-edged sword, though, mate. So you got to watch that one. The fact is that it's one of the first. Well, it's certainly one of the story. It's the first time that we've seen it in Australia. I think it's the first time it's been printed in English, and it's from 1972. So while I might be the old man of the podcast, the story's even older than me. And I've got to say, I really enjoyed it. I genuinely enjoyed this story. This was, I guess, the Egmont stories have been around for long enough now that, well, certainly older than me, that they can be considered to be a part of my childhood of the fandom, I suppose. And as much as I do consider myself to be a Lee Falk man first and foremost, there's an authenticity with a story like this that comes at the period of time that it's been around.
That's a good point.
It includes it would be one of the first stories, I guess, that introduces the country of Rhodia. Whether it's the actual first or not, you might have to go back and listen to the Robert Oman podcast,
which is episode 101.
101, absolutely. To hear more about that. It was a really familiar story. I like the way that Magnus tied into a lot of the Lee Falk tropes about that idea of the boyfriend going away to save money and to work in the city. The tribes girls, the sad little tribes girl whose boyfriend has gone away to earn money in the city to save up for their marriage, and that took me back to Wombo the gambler and these sorts of stories of Lee Falk. So I thought that was a really clever way to bring that in. There are some really obvious examples of 1972 technology. We if this story was written today, we would have the Phantom on a mobile phone instead of the old wireless and that sort of thing. How he thought it was the journalist or something that he hooked up with, wasn't it? Who
the museum, wasn't he worked at the museum?
Yes, that's right. Who goes in to be a spy by carrying a radio that they've cunningly made into a two-way thing. I don't know how he thought he was going to get away with walking into camp with a radio and pretending that he's not a spy. But anyway, where are we? I've made a note about. Oh, that's right. As I said, it was a really familiar story. Just as I was thinking that, Garan at the top of page 6 actually says, and you can see it on the YouTube, this story sounds familiar. So I thought that was a really clever touch by the writer to acknowledge that it's a tip of the hat to an old familiar story. It was really cleverly done in terms of that political side of things that we talked about with Robert about the Phantom being political, because whilst the Phantom very much is involved in a political story here, it becomes quite clear at the end that he's not taking a political side.
Yes,
he's protecting the oppressed and fighting for the jungle people who are being oppressed. Now, that does mean that he fights against a right-wing group. And the Phantom can be seen to be quite, your social justice warrior or whatever in this story. And that would rile some people, especially in today's society, in Australia and America and England and the way the world works at the moment. but it makes it quite clear, almost cornily clear. It's almost corny in the way that it makes it clear in the last couple of panels that that's what's going on.
It's almost over the top in it making a point that.
Yeah, and just even the last thing, and if you haven't read this, then while you're listening to the podcast, press pause, go and read your comic, and then come back. Just the way that even in the very last panel, the Phantom says, it's all very well and good to read about these stories in the newspaper, but you've actually got to get out and take action too. And it's almost a 1972 smack against clicktivism and people signing online petitions. What does that really do? You've got to get out and actually do something, sort of thing. So I thought that was quite good.
So in today's world, it will be all the people just sharing a post on Facebook and not actually doing anything about it.
Yeah, exactly right. That said, what the Phantom
what do you
does
think about the art?
Oh, yeah, no, the art's fine. The art's good.
Did you like the art? Yeah, I really like the art. There's a panel in there. He's in the jungle and he's just revealed himself as the Phantom. Can't remember the page at the top of my head.
It's right in the middle.
But that's right in the middle. There's that real iconic. Scroll down a little bit. Maybe next page. I don't know where it is. Maybe it might even be before that. But there's this real iconic picture of the Phantom. Like there's the fire coming up, and it's kind of got that underglow, which gives him that effect. And he looks awe-inspiring. And I've seen that image being reused so many times from Team Fantomen and Egmont and Semic and stuff like that. Such an iconic image. So for me to actually see where that image originated from was a bit of a kick.
Yeah. I can't find it as I flick through. I did note that was the centre pages 18 and 19. There's an absolutely impossible change from Kit Walker to the Phantom. You can see at the bottom of page 18, he's got his hat and sunglasses on, and you can see his hair and sideburns. And then one panel later, he's taken it off and he's got the mask and the cowl on and all that sort of stuff. So he's standing literally right in front of the in a crowded room. So,
do you reckon they went, "Oh no, it's the Phantom," and they all cover their eyes, or excuse me, gentlemen, I'm just going to use to close your eyes.
Yeah, just look
so
the
I
other
can
way.
Put my cowl on.
No, it's just one of those things that makes you remember, hey, I'm reading a comic book.
Yeah, exactly. So are you enjoying, from someone who's been privileged enough to be able to talk to Magnus, Ulf, and then also Robert Armand as well, and then for those who are listening who have heard these podcasts, are you enjoying getting and reading these stories, even if it is 40, 50 years later, but enjoying reading them out?
Oh, yeah, no, I definitely enjoyed reading the story. It's probably, I'm just flicking ahead, it may well be my favourite of the 5 we're going to review tonight, actually. Yeah. All right, cool.
It's
It's an interesting one where the Phantom does find himself in the middle of... Yeah, just that it's interesting that he finds himself in the middle of a war zone and quite cleverly doesn't actually do any killing, but is certainly in and around when other people are doing some killing. So, and on his behalf and with his, permission and what's the word I'm searching for here? I'm not sure. Anyway, yeah.
We see a bit of that with that point that you raised in the annual for 2019, which was the war annual as well. Like in a lot of those stories, you don't actually see the Phantom firing apart from the Lee Falk goes to war story, but in the others, you don't really see the Phantom participating. He's always like a bystander to help the oppressed, which is something that you've already raised as well. Yeah. Cool. So anything else you need to raise, or are you happy for us to move on?
Last one was that Robert certainly talked a lot about Stephen's mind being the bad guys, and this is Morris's mind. So I'm not sure if that Who knows? Was that part of the translation? Has Frew just named it Morris's instead of Stevens? Should it have been Stevens? Was it Morris's in the original? I don't know, but it's interesting that Stevens' mine was a big thing, and here we are dealing with a mine that is using slaves, and yet it's a different mine. So
I think it's different. I think it is different because the Morris mine is in Rhodia, where Stevens' mine is actually in Bengala, because the Stevens family were actually in cabinet and stuff like that. And if you remember the Phantom map that we did the English translation of, which is the map of Bengala, there's actually the Stevens mine which is in there.
It's interesting to, again, probably reading far too much into a comic book, but Moetan used to be Morris Town, and here we have Morris Mine, and, so interesting.
And then I'll give you 2 seconds of fame. What did it used to be before that?
Fraser Town, obviously. Not sure why they went away from that. That was obviously the I think it was Fraser Town in 2 of the first 4 dailies or something like that. Before
the Diamond
Leaf
Hunters and
mind.
Little Toma.
Yeah.
Probably for the better, but we'll move on. So the next issue is, again, this did come in with Found by Gaslight, but we're going to hold off onto that one.
Sure.
Frew 1845, which has got a cover from Jamie Johnson, and anyone who's on Facebook should have seen some progress shots of that, which was a lot of fun. And I know, just speaking for myself, I enjoyed the process of that. So this story is called The Scavengers. So that's a Team Fantomen story, which was from 2018, I would like to believe. Yes, 2018. And that is written by Klaus Ramufi and drawn by Raphael Ruse. And then there's also the Founded by Gaslight episode 9, which is done by Glenn Lumsden and Jason Paulus. And again, as we talked about, the cover is from Jamie Johnson. Too many J's. So did you want to start us off with the cover, mate?
The cover's pretty spectacular, and you're absolutely right about seeing the work in progress shots from Jamie, and he's quite open about sharing that sort of stuff. He's doing all of his own colouring now, which makes the effect of the fire and all the rest of it on the front cover just so much more impressive as well. I think to see the development that he's shown as an artist over the 2-3 years that he's been doing Phantom covers more regularly is really impressive. I don't think that Jamie would mind me saying that a couple of years ago he wouldn't have backed himself in to do the colouring himself on these, and now he is, and he's doing a fantastic job. He really does take internal panels and replicate but reimagine them quite effectively, and so there is an image inside the story that this picture is quite obviously based on, but it's a far more stunning and compelling and dynamic piece that he's done.
I'll have to follow up on that. Just for a little, free bit of Phantom history. This story was actually featured as Fantomet, which is Norway, as their last ever magazine from that series. So that's just a little bit of a freebie for you. Just talking about covers, I'm looking at the original cover from Raphael Ruse. I prefer the Frew cover to the Team Fantomen cover. I feel like the Frew one's a lot more dynamic. It probably doesn't give away as much of the story, in the sense because I picked up what the story was because Raphael Ruse has got the Phantom all bandaged up like Jamie's does, but I had no idea. I'm thinking, okay, so why is the Phantom in a tunnel? And so I like that. I liked the fact that the cover didn't give the story away. It was engaging and stuff. And for me, it drew me wanting to read the story so I could figure out what the Phantom was doing in this tunnel. So, So that's my thoughts on the cover. Anything else you need to discuss on the cover?
No, that's fine. I will pick you up on one aspect of the creative team, and that was while Rafa Ruiz was certainly the artist, it's inked by Coral Martinez, and
yes.
that's really noteworthy, I think, because while it's not a big deal made of it in the message from the publisher, nor should there be, it wouldn't be too many female artists that have got an inking job on a full story of the Phantom, I wouldn't have thought. So she's joined a very small club there, Coral, and
yes.
or however you actually pronounce that. And I think that's what noteworthy. And I really like the artwork in this, whether it's Ruiz's pencils that she's working with or the way that she's inked it. It's really quite stunning. A lot of the work in this.
Yeah, no, the story's brilliant. I really enjoyed the story. I will admit, at first, I'm kind of like, where's this story heading and what's going on? But by the end of the story, I'm like, I like the story. I actually really, really enjoy the story. And it would probably be in the top, probably 10 stories of the year that I've read so far.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm assuming by that you didn't?
I wouldn't have it in my top 10.
There's elements I didn't like. About the fact that the Phantom is really struggling with concussion and seems to get knocked out quite easily.
I think it's 4 times in 20 pages he gets knocked out in this one. Stephen
that was
apoplectic.
Yeah, but that's why we've shipped him over to Ireland to so we didn't have to deal with that. But so that was an issue, and I've talked to a couple of writers about it, and they've talked about that it's, without feeling like I'm having a dig at writers, but it's the easy way of moving the story along, in a sense. Knock the Phantom, knock the person out, and then you can kind of move it along to that sequence. And
to when he wakes up and things have happened and whatever.
Yeah, rather than having to think of, okay, how are we going to get the Phantom from all the story from here to there? Oh, let's just knock the Phantom out. So that is a weak point, but the rest of the story I really enjoyed. But maybe it was because I had no expectations of the story.
Yeah. I didn't really buy into the society that had been created on this garbage island. We go from... It's Mad Max or post-apocalyptic type society,
which is all the rage these days.
Yeah, and it starts with, I'm on a garbage island, it's completely uninhabited. Oh, there's a person, and I could buy, half a dozen homeless people or whatever that have lived on this island. But for there to be an entire society that have created towns and villages and tunnels, and I just couldn't buy that. This is an island that's just off the coast of a major city that is having its rubbish dumped daily, and there's people coming out and barges coming out. I couldn't take that seriously, and so it lost me a little bit as a story there.
That's a good point. Just go on that point a little bit, and not wanting to labour or get into too much, but does it, when they were taking the rubbish off the barge, isn't the people that live on the island the people that kind of like get the rubbish off the barge? Which does make sense, if that is the case. If I remember that correctly.
Yeah, it's sort of scooped over a little bit. When he wakes up from this second or third time that he's been knocked out, whatever it is, he's just suddenly on the island. There's nothing really said about how that's unloaded or anything like that. He just starts running into,
Yep. All right, cool. But what did you think about kind of like the moral of the story or the way it was wrapped up? Or just neither there or there?
I'll be honest, this is probably 3 or 4 weeks since I've read this one. I did have some catching up to do, but I actually read this one when it came out. And I did that immediately because the art gripped me, and some of the panel structures, the way that together grabbed me, and possibly the cover as well drew me in. Yeah, I don't remember being amazed by it like that.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, before we move on, I just want to make follow up on that point of you made about Carol, which I should have had in my notes, but we're actually in talks with having a bit of a interview, a written interview with Carol as well. So we've sent off some questions for her. So hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll learn a little bit more about this person and how she became to work with Raphael and on Team Fantomen as well.
Can I, before we move on, can I put the question back to you since you asked me and I didn't have a very good answer? What did you think of the ending?
I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I enjoyed this story. So there is a bit of a point of difference. But, you know, maybe it's because I do like a bit of a mystery, like a whodunit type of plot, because you're trying to think, okay, so this person is dead. Who did it? We know it's not the Phantom because, we, the reader, know the Phantom's not going to kill it, but he's been blamed for it. So the Phantom has to use his detective skills to be able to identify who it is, and he's going through, and there's a lot of thinking and looking at clues, and then he gets knocked out, and so that clue gets removed, and then the person that most people would be least expected to be the killer ended up being the killer, which is fairly common, and it's not a new subplot or a new plot by any stretch of the imagination. And then the whole Rubbish Island was just kind of like a unique twist to add on to the whodunit mystery. So I guess that's probably what I enjoyed about it.
Fair enough.
All right, so let's move on to Frew 1846, which is I've actually managed to find this comment, so I can actually point up so you don't have to look at me. Okay, so this is Frew issue 1846, which the story is The Nuclear Pirates by Norman Walker and George Bess. Now, a cover by Glenn Ford, which we haven't seen too many covers from him, to be honest. No. And then on the back cover, it is a colour advert for the trading cards. So, cover. What do you think of the cover?
Yeah, I don't know whether this is a compliment or detriment or whatever it is to whoever. I actually thought it was Jeremy McPherson's when I first picked it up. I thought that he had done this one, and I really liked it. I really liked the looking over the Phantom's shoulder at this exploding or fiery nuclear power plant that had the dragon flames that were coming out of it. I like the colours of the grass against the blue of the sky. The dramatic stance of the Phantom as he looks on the burning building. Yeah, I quite like the cover.
All right, cool. When I saw it, I got excited because to me it didn't look like dragons. It looked like the Hydra type of thing.
Yep.
So I got excited because one of my most favourite enemies that the Phantom has ever faced is the Hydra.
Yep.
Lee Falk created one story, which did actually come after Stan Lee or whoever created it in the Marvel comics. So it was Lee Falk that copied Marvel and not Marvel copying Lee Falk. But I really enjoyed this story because it was all about the Hydra. And I think they are a greatly underused criminal organisation that we should see more of. What do you think about it?
I agree that I like the Hydra as a criminal organisation, as a character or set, if you like. We should point out that it's from 1978. Norman Worker is the author, and I quite like a lot of Norman Worker's stories. That said, it's a story that had a lot of potential that I didn't really get into in the end. I know I sound like a bit of a naysayer on these last two stories, but I think the concept of the computer that the Phantom has had installed in the Jungle Patrol was really entertaining to hear what the 1978 supercomputer was like, and basically turning the Jungle Patrol into Interpol was pretty cool. Of course, the Phantom then, as unknown commander, gets the very first printout that this computer ever has, and has it sealed, so no one else in the Jungle Patrol even gets to see it. He may as well have had it installed in the Skull Cave and given Colonel Wirraboo less of a headache.
Do you think, like, just about that, I guess this is a 28-page story, I think it is. Starts at 3, goes to 35, so it's a 32-page story. Well, that's an extra 10 pages than what we get currently. It's almost like they created that to fill in some of those extra pages. But I reckon if this story was created today, I don't reckon we'll have that stuff at the beginning.
No, and more's the pity, because I enjoyed that part of the story. Actually, I probably enjoyed that part of the story far more than I enjoyed the back half of the story, to be honest. I love seeing behind the scenes in the Jungle Patrol and how that the hierarchy works there. And again, it's that classic trope of Colonel Wirraboo showing someone else around, and then they even asked this supercomputer who is the commander of the Jungle Patrol, and even it doesn't know. So, I thought that was quite cool.
Yeah. One of the points that I thought was kind of cool about this story, and we haven't seen much of it, is the Phantom talking to the press, which you see on page 9.
Yeah.
And then, it being published in the newspaper and stuff like that. I thought it was that was something that we haven't really seen much, and I thought that's interesting. And I guess the Phantom was doing that to, I guess, cast out a bait, I guess you could say. But I like that point. I like that element.
Yeah, it was really interesting. This followed. It was either a couple of days later or about the same time that you put up the post around the dictators getting their heads knocked together on the front page, and one of the panels from that story was Kit Jr. saying, "Oh, I saw you on the TV, Dad," and that sort of stuff doesn't happen very often, and yet here it was from a 1978 story and a Cy Barry story, and we're seeing them both pretty hot on the heels of each other in 2019. It is a good ploy to try and flush out an adversary who you've got absolutely no idea where they are and who are very, very good at hiding, to make it publicly known that you're looking for them, and so they will come after you.
Yeah. Now, remember the last story we talked about, the scavengers, where I was saying you're going through the whodunit type of mystery story, figuring out who it was and stuff like that. It was almost the exact opposite. From very early on, you figured out who the bad guy is in this story, and I think that was probably the point that probably, I guess, if we were giving him stars out of 5 or good marks out of 5, I would vote it, or I would mark it down, was because it wasn't a mystery on who the bad guy was, where the scavengers it was. Does that kind of make sense?
Oh, yeah.
If you compare those two stories?
No, 100% agree. I figured out who the bad guy was in the scavengers probably 2 pages before the Phantom did. I figured out who the bad guy was in this story in like the second panel that we met in, And I think that it was far too blunt, or far too obvious. It was like one of those Law and Order episodes where they've got a special guest star, Woody Harrelson or Whoopi Goldberg is starring in Law and Order. Of course they're going to be the murderer. Why else are they in the show? Within the first minute that's the bad guy. And it was similar here. And then he just went, crisscrossing across Canada, looking for various ways to flush out this bad guy who we know is standing beside him the whole way, or skulking off to go and do his bad guy thing. So
now, you make mention of Canada. Can you remember any other stories where the Phantom has appeared in Canada?
I can't say that I have particularly. We'll have to ask Guy Poisson. He would surely know. I thought that the Mounties were vastly underused.
That's a good point.
Unfortunately, there's elements of, there's certainly many elements of Canada, whether it's the dam or the wood gathering, the logging and that sort of thing, I should say. The grizzly bear. There's certainly it's clearly set in Canada, but it was just a really good opportunity to have the Mounties involved, I thought.
Yeah. All right, cool. Before we move on, anything else you want to raise?
No, not particularly. It's a nice enough story, and it's just it's certainly not my favourite Hydra story. And it just got complicated. The plot get overly complicated about it's the nuclear pirates, and oh my goodness, the lengths they're going to I don't even really know what they were trying to achieve in the nuclear power plant in the end. It just got a little bit overly complicated, I think.
I think that's the point that I was making earlier, is that it feels like they were almost trying to fit. They almost had too much space to write the story. And you're an English teacher, so you'd be better equipped than this than with me. But sometimes like when you're looking at something and it's like, if they got rid of this, and this, and then made it a 20-page story, it could actually be a good story.
Yeah, quite possibly. You could certainly cut back some waste, I suppose. The third or fourth time that he followed to a different, you probably don't need that. And I take your point. Probably the opening 4 or 5 pages could have been trimmed back to 1 or 2 and that sort of thing to move it along a bit quicker.
Now, one other point I want to make, which is regarding to Glenn Ford's cover, he doesn't hide his signature in it anymore.
No, I don't think he does it as much anymore.
I know. That's disappointing. Glenn, you need to hide your signature so we can all try and find it. That was the thing. Well, I remember as a kid, and I've said this before on the podcast, and I think I've even said this to Glenn when we've interviewed him as well. There was 4 or 5 of us, and we would do a Where's Wally moment, and we will stick the cover out in front of us like this, and we're like, where is it? And it's like, I found it. And then you weren't allowed to say anything, and then we all had competitions to see who can find it the first. And then there was always that one person that, I don't know whether they were just blind or an idiot, but they could never find it, and so you used to have fun at that expense. But Glenn, you need to put those signatures back in there hidden, because that was a childhood memory that you've taken away from him. So please put it back.
You know that Glenn right now is chuckling into his glass of milk because he knows that it's in there and you haven't found it.
I'm looking again. So for the next 5 minutes, there's going to be absolute silence now. Okay. So moving on, issue 1847, which is so the first story is The Ghost at Gallows Inn by Klaas Ramufi and Henya Bade. And then there's also the last episode of The Phantom by Gaslight, which is episode 10, which is by Glenn Lumsden and Jason Paulus. So first of all, and the cover, is by Shane Foley and covered by Sarge. This is a good issue. I like this issue.
All right, tell me why you like this issue.
Okay. First of all, got the Phantom facing a few. You've got emotion on the Phantom, and then you've got the point of the view from the bad guy with him holding the sword. You've got that ghostly image of the bad guy, Gallo, he's a good bad guy. I liked him as a character. And then you've got it undercover, so there's lots of black, which that digs it for me. And then even the back cover as well, where you've got, the Jungle Patrol fighting and stuff like that. I like black. It stands out nicely. Do you want to make any comments regarding the cover, or do you want me just to move on to the story?
No, keep going. You've covered that well. I agree with everything you've said there.
Okay. Now, it is worth pointing out that this story was voted by the Swedish readers as the favourite of 2018. So, now, I must admit, when I saw that, I thought, oh, this story must be pretty good. And then when I saw it was done by Henya Bade, and Henya Bade's not my favourite artist at the moment in this current generation, I was a little bit like, oh, maybe the Swedes are a little bit, I don't know, I thought a little bit cuckoo or something like that, because I was thinking, why would they vote this as their favourite story? So I was expecting that this story would have to be good. So I came in with a high expectation, and normally when I come in with a high expectation, I get disappointed. I was not disappointed with this story. At the beginning, I was like, oh, here we go. It's one of those superficial fantasy type of stories. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm not going to enjoy this. But I actually did enjoy it. Hats off to you, Swedes. You were not wrong. I'm not sure about it being the best story, but I'm wrong. It deserves to be one of the better stories of 2018. And I really, really did enjoy it. And for a story that's only 20-odd pages long, there's a lot that goes into it. I love the bad guy. You've got the likable bad guy of the captain. Then you've got the despicable guy that you like to hate, who's the traitor who fought against the Jungle Patrol and then, also betrayed the captain as well. And you got the epic sword fights. The sword fight on page, I can't even see page numbers, 24 and 25. Ideally, could have been a little bit more fleshed out. But apart from that, I liked the story and I was pleasantly surprised.
Yep. Well said. No, I agree. There's so many elements of this that I like. I love the fact that we're finding out a little bit more here about the stories of the Sixth Phantom and the origins of the Jungle Patrol. We've just talked about the nuclear pirates where they've got a supercomputer. This is certainly well before the days of a supercomputer. They're just starting to form their identity and are little more than pirates themselves at this stage still. But they are starting to fight against the really bad guys. The artwork of Bade or Bade, or however you say it, I quite enjoyed this. I like his use of colours. It's really detailed artwork. It's very busy at times, but it's not too busy, if you know what I mean.
And it matches the style as well. The style of the story, the art matches the.
Yeah, I must say there was a page in particular that caught my eye, page 10 and 11. I thought that elements of that, or certainly the Phantom on page 10 and 11, that could have been drawn by Jason Paulos. Very, very similar sorts of depictions of the actual character of the Phantom himself. There, which I guess you can do a quick comparison if you want to flick to Gaslight at the back, but more I guess the is it Spyglass or Secrets Over Spyglass or something that Jason did the cover for not so long ago. That sort of Phantom struck me. I'm not a massive fan of these dream sequence stories, and again, he's been knocked out, or has he been knocked out, or then he comes to, and he's had this whole dream at the whole time. I'm not a massive fan of that structure, I suppose. I much prefer, and I know this is very old school and very old fashioned, but I much prefer the twins and Toma and Rex saying, oh, can you read us a story out of the Chronicles? And then he reads a story from the Chronicles and that becomes the main story. I much prefer that to this other sort of a weird sort of a setup. But I guess
the point of, rather than it being that, is that it's, in a sense, it's the Phantom helping his ancestor and also helping his ancestor's villain. And so that was kind of like the element I kind of liked. Like, I understand the whole fantasy element. I don't normally like that either, or the dream sequence. And we've seen it in many Team Fantomen. We've seen it in a couple of Lee Falk stories, The Gladiator and The Ruins of Phoenix are two that come to memory from Lee Falk. But this by far, like, I didn't mind it. Like, I like, instead of just the Phantom helping his the Sixth Phantom, in a sense that he's helping the pirate become more legendary. It was kind of just a unique twist of that type of element.
Yeah.
So it was something a little bit different. Like, the 21st Phantom, who's by far probably the greatest Phantom that's ever lived, in a sense, helping a pirate is something a little bit different.
Yeah, fair enough.
So yeah, so no, it was interesting. So let's do Gaslight.
Okay.
So first question I want to ask, maybe we need to do a whole, I don't know, we probably won't, but where do you sit with Gaslight after the 10 episodes and after 7, 8, 9 and 10 have, well no, 8, 9, 10, there was a year and a half gap between the first 7. Like,
it is interesting.
Looking back at it, yeah, where do you sit with it?
It's interesting, that huge gap between episode 7 and episode 8, and then all of a sudden what we've only talked about 4 comics, and in those 4 comics we've got episodes 8, 9 and 10. So it's a little difficult to sort of peg the whole story to the 10 episodes together. I don't know. I feel like with Gaslight, they just, for whatever reason, have decided that it was time to finish it and time to wrap it up. And maybe that's why Glenn Lumsden was brought in, because obviously he's a significant difference in the creative team. I believe, I can take a look. I think the episode 7 is still credited as being Christopher Sequeira, Glenn Lumsden as editor, perhaps, and then Glenn as the writer for 9 and 10. So obviously Christopher didn't get the chance to finish the story, which I'm sure would be disappointing for him, because no writer is going to want to write the first 75 to 80% of a story and then have someone else finish it. I'm sure there would be reasons for that, whether they're from Christopher's side or from Frew's side, I'm not sure. But I do get the sense that Glenn came in to then just finish the story and get it done and wrap it up. So
it feels like it's been wrapped up quicker than maybe originally intended.
Yeah, I agree. Which is not necessarily a bad thing, I've got to say, because from my point of view, and again, I'm very much the forkist, the newspaper strippist type of reader. While I really did genuinely enjoy the first probably 2 episodes of Phantom by Gaslight, if I remember, way back then, my impressions as I started to read it, I've probably fallen out of love with it a little bit. It got really complicated. It had lots of characters who I felt like I probably should have already known, and without having the knowledge of those characters, I wasn't able to understand the story as well. There became too many characters for a story that was only 6 or 8 pages once every month or 2 to follow it effectively. So it
was almost like it felt like you didn't really know what was going on. And to be honest, I still don't really know what was going on.
I think we know now that it was all about.
I'm still not really sure.
No, the 3 and however many, because there was a stage there where there was far more than 3 bad guys. It boiled down to 3.
Rogues gallery.
Yeah, exactly. It boiled down to these 3 who wanted to be subversive against the British government and take them down by melting their gold.
Melt the gold, and but then
which
the problem
is,
that I have
probably a
melting
pretty
the gold
storyline. Sorry.
The problem I had with the melting the gold is, where was it? In the prelogue, the explanation type of thing, on page 34, it says, "As for the gold in the vault, though indeed dissolved by the acid, it is completely recoverable and is being reclaimed even as I write this." I just thought, that was a waste of time. Like you watch those movies and you have this huge, big plot type of thing, and it builds up for 2/3, 3/4, 5/6 of the whole thing, and then it just kind of ends really, really quickly, and you're just kind of left empty. And that's kind of how I felt. Like, I felt a little bit empty. Like you, I loved the premise of it. I loved the idea. I loved the strategy. I loved it all, especially being the backup and stuff like that. I think, now this is just my opinion, solely my opinion, but I think if these backup stories almost need to be self-contained backup stories, because this Gaslight, Heart of Darkness is getting harder and harder, and we'll talk about that later as well. So it almost needs to be standalone 8-page stories, or if you're going to be releasing 2 issues side by side, you have a 16-page story that's part 1 and part 2, but you don't go much more longer than that, because maybe it's just that our attention span's shorter or whatever. But I think one of the reasons why this suffered was because of the gap between the parts, and I think that's the reason why it has suffered with Heart of Darkness as well.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. No doubt at all. The fact that these 3 followed so quickly after each other meant that I actually read them and engaged in these last 3 chapters. Yeah. It's difficult to believe that this is 30%. 3 out of 10 have appeared in four comics. It's so drawn out, and then all of a sudden, in terms of the entire story arc, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure that this would stand up, to be honest, as a collected trade paperback, because I have a feeling that would highlight how disjointed it was from start to finish. And that I don't mean any disrespect to the creative team when I say that. I think there were plans that went awry across the course of the 2 years or whatever it took to get it out. I thought the original premise of the skull rings disappearing from the cave, and let's find out what happened to them. That
took a back seat.
Well, that was on page 1 of episode 1, and on page last of episode last, and mentioned that all in between.
Now that's the question I was going to that was one of the points I was going to raise next. So now, this ring, in your opinion, I know the answer to this one. So that's why I want to ask your opinion first. What's the significance of the ring? Do you understand that?
Of which ring?
Of the ring that was missing.
Weren't they were his father's. And now you're asking a question from 2 years ago weren't they, didn't the skull ring and the good mark go missing from the cave?
Yes. So you're right. So that first page was basically the skull ring and the good mark ring being stolen.
Yeah.
By, as it turned out to be, Julie Walker.
Yes.
And then melted into 3 separate skull rings for the 3 phantoms.
Yep. Now, Julie and Kit and Adani.
I thought it was
Amadi. Now, Adani. I'm in Queensland and there's a mine being built. Amadi.
So we've cleared it out. We're on the same page and all that. Like, I'm reading it and I'm going, is this a skull ring? And so I messaged one of the creators and they confirmed and said, yeah, it's the skull ring and the good ring. And I went, wow, how do you justify taking away such a large thing of the Phantom lore? Julie Walker is a thief and has desecrated a Phantom thing. And then if you ever want to go one step further, we already know that the Phantom ring cannot be melted down and destroyed anyway.
And the 2 rings have been turned into 3, none of which are big enough to be worn except by children, and that's symbolic of stuff. And it almost. And now we're talking about the last 3 panels of the last chapter of the story, and it's almost like, let's put a punctuation point on this to demonstrate that it's not really a Phantom story.
If I was the editor, I would have asked them to just forget that. Just pretend it never happened.
God, that's hard to do because it's the entire premise of the story. It's page 1 of episode 1.
is it the whole premise of the story? Because you could almost just go, well,
you've got to circle
that
back to
happened
it somehow.
That happened. Yeah. Well, okay, maybe, but I wouldn't have had it as the rings were the skull mark rings and the good mark rings.
Oh, I absolutely would not have. Who knows? The story needed to be finished. Apparently, it's certainly. I'd be shocked if this was the ending that was in mind when the beginning was written. But to tell a good story, a really effective story, does circle back and does come full circle and does finish. It has,
but I understand all that, but this is when you're talking about the Phantom and the Phantom lore. One of the top 10 pieces of the Phantom lore is his skull ring and his good mark ring.
Oh, it'd be top 3.
Yeah. So it's very important, right?
Yeah.
Generation, rings.
Yep.
Doesn't kill.
Yep.
Then we go, there's 3, that's been highly questioned, maybe smashed to smithereens.
Yeah, as I say, that point, that proves that this is not a real Phantom story, because the what is it, the 17th Phantom is the father of Julian of Kit. His rings, if this is lore, and it's not, but if you were to try and work this into lore, which you can't, but if you wanted to, his ring has somehow disappeared, become these 3, and then yet the current Phantom 21, 20, 19, 18, they had a skull ring. Where did that come from? So what did they melt these back and recreate the skull and the good? It's just, I think
it unfortunately it left me cold.
Yeah.
And that's why I think if I never read that last bit, I could have lived with it. But because I read that last bit, it left me cold. That's why I'm saying if they had either reworked it or just gotten rid of it, I think from my point of view only. This is just my personal point of view. There might be other people that have liked it and all that type of stuff, but from me, and people listen to us to get our opinions. And my opinion is that I wouldn't have included that.
Yeah, I don't like it either. As I think is evident. If they hadn't included it, then we'd spend this part of the podcast saying, "But what happened to the stolen rings? Where was the finish there?"
Do you reckon?
I probably no. I would.
I'd forgotten about that.
Oh no, because that was me. That was the hook that grabbed me in. Is the rings are missing.
You see, but I never really, and I remember having this discussion with Jason and Chris when we first did the podcast with the creators, and don't ask me what episode it was. I asked, what's the first page of the story? Yeah. And for me, that was, I was interested then, but I'd forgotten about that.
Episode 65, if you want to go back 65.
And look. 65. Yeah. So, and what year was that?
That was June of 2017.
There's a lot of Junes. Are you just saying June to like...
No, that was June the 2nd of 2017. Matt Kyme was July the 1st, 2017.
So I don't know. I wonder, if you're listening to this, had you remembered that first page? Would have you remembered it again if that wasn't there? It'll be interesting to see.
I think a lot of people with these fillers, unless they're standalones, like you say, I think people start to tune them out and stop reading them, which I'm sure.
And that's why I think
when we move on to the next one, which is Gaslight. Which is Heart of Darkness.
Segue. So let's move on. So issue 1848, which is Guardian of the Eastern Dark, Part 1. And the title of Part 1 is The Man on a Zebra, which is by Mikel Sol and Cesar Spadera. Now, Mikel Sol was interviewed by us in episode, what, Dan?
Hang on, I'm typing timestamps. I can't be doing that job as well. That's far more recent. Okay. That's not June of 2017. That's
it's about 117, I believe, from the top of my memory. Dan will look at it and I'll continue. Now, in
116 of April this year, April 15 this year.
116. I was close.
Not far off.
I was close. So in episode 116, we talked to Mikkel Sol, who is the author of this, but is also the editor of Team Fantomen, or the Fantomen magazine. Now, he talked about this story in that podcast, talking about exploring the idea of the third Phantom having two wives and how that would have some interesting developments dealing with stepchildren and such. So I was looking forward to that story because I remembered that conversation we had. So cover, which we've both got it up now, is by Jeremy McPherson and colours by Mason. Now, the second part of this is due to come out, and that will actually have more significance to our next podcast, which Dan made mention of before. So, Dan, thoughts on the cover, and then go into the story.
Oh, I really love the cover. Really enjoy the cover. I like Jeremy's Phantom more.
So what do you like about it?
Oh, this guy. The way that he's done the Phantom, the profile of the Phantom, he's sort of turning, looking over his shoulder. The whole concept of this really short, heavy-set lad riding around on a zebra, I'm glad it's mentioned in the book about the fact that that's a highly inappropriate thing to do because the zebra will get snapped. So that whole concept is a weird one. But just the Phantom himself on the front cover, I think that's a really dynamic pose. You take that green cape off him, and that's the sort of Phantom that you would have seen in any of those classic Tommy Hughes covers way back in the day. And I think it's a really classic, traditional pose for the Phantom. Now,
I just want to quickly interject there. Interesting note, zebras may have a weak back, but they've still got a good kick on them. And I can tell you that firsthand. I have actually been kicked by a zebra and it broke my collarbone.
Okay, now we must segue. You've got to tell us that story. I'm going to tell us the story about you being kicked by a zebra.
Well, I was
How old were
in
you?
a wildlife, would have been maybe 22, 23. This is when I was at uni. I went on a mission trip to Indonesia. We went on a safari park, and being stupid Aussie, didn't bother looking at the sign that says you must stay in your car. There was this really big hippopotamus that had its mouth open. So I wanted a good photo of it. So I was about a metre away from this hippopotamus with its mouth open. And then getting back to the car, I made the mistake of walking behind a zebra. And anyone who has been around horses would know that you do not walk around the back of a horse.
Yep.
Just the same as a zebra. So all I remember is the zebra going on its front legs and giving me a kick, and I almost managed to get out of it. I busted up my collarbone. Being in Indonesia, Jakarta, not like it was Bali, was not really any good doctors, so I carried the injury. And then being a uni student, I couldn't really afford going to the doctors or anything, so I never actually got any doctor's help with the broken collarbone. Wow. So every time I see a zebra, it just reminds me of that. And it's a great story.
Very good. All right, well, there you go. I did not think I would be hearing a story about you getting your collarbone broken in Indonesia by a zebra when we sat down to record tonight. Okay, your thoughts on the cover, other than the PTSD that you suffer every time you look at it.
Yeah. I like it. I like it better as a pull-out or as a double page than I do as just the front cover standalone, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you kind of get a greater picture as a double page spread. You know, most people would say that double page spreads are better than a single page, but we'll leave that one there. The thing I like about Jeremy with his art, especially with this, is I don't know how this is going to sound or if I'm using the right words, but the cleanness.
Yeah.
There's a real cleanness with his art. There's not and there's a lot of Italian artists in the past, and even Barry as well during a lot of his time, where they don't put extra lines. They use empty space and carefully lines to identify whether it's the muscles, the cheekbone, or whatever. But I just like the cleanness of it. There's, and when you're doing that, there's you got to make sure your line work is crisp. You've got to make sure that every line you put on maximizes the effect you're trying to do. And I think Jeremy does a good job of that.
And I can vouch, and I know you can as well, that if you were to get a commission like a sketch cover or whatever from Jeremy, that those lines are what he does, and I couldn't recommend highly enough. If you want to get in touch with him and get a commission or a sketch cover from him, absolutely do so, because what you see here, there's a bit more work put into it, but it's pretty much what you get in a commission from him as well.
All right, so the story. What do you think about the story, mate?
Jury's still out. I'm going to wait until episode 2, I think, to make a firm judgment on that. And I know we're doing tonight what we have said before that we hate Frew doing, which is to spread, put a big gap between episode 1 and episode 2. And in a perfect world, we probably would have either recorded this Comics and News before this came out or after the next one came out. But it is what it is, and we wanted to record on this Tuesday night, and so the comic hasn't come out. I'm not sure yet.
It's a bit of a bummer because I like
the art.
The art's good.
Spadari's work here.
I like the interaction with the Phantom and Pura, and I like how we're getting to know a little bit more about Pura and their dynamic being as a stepmom and stuff. And that was done with, what's that fat dude's name? His fat
Theta?
Dude's name is Thetna. I like the Thetna, It almost sounds like you're saying feta. So I like how they explored that element by this guy using cheap tricks. So I thought that was clever. I thought it almost feels like when the story was written, it was like, this, how we've talked about in the past where it's like you have stories, if it was one story or one story, which is 22, 24 pages, sometimes we feel like, this would be good if it was padded out a little bit more. The first, from pages 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, almost felt like it was padded out too much to get a good story from 25 pages to 44 pages. It just felt a bit too padded out. Once you kind of got over that, I kind of did like it. Some of the fantasy elements, again, I'm kind of sitting on the fence like you see on page 15. And the jury's out for me. Like what you are. There's elements that I like. There's elements where I'm like, what are we going to get? I'm not really sure.
I think that things like that padding that you're talking about there, I'm not sure that I see it as padding. I suspect that across a 44-page story, that will turn out to be, and I think we're seeing hints of it at the tail of this part. He's turning him into zombies or whatever it is with that drink that he's giving the criminals. It's hard to know what relationship, if any, this guy has had with those criminals beforehand. It looks like he might have set them up and whatever. Whether there's a payoff in the second part, not sure. I do like the characterization of, and I'm going to get I'm trying desperately to find her name. What's the Pura? Yeah. I do like the characterization of Pyrrha. She's Diana-ish in the sense that she's had jump on the back of a tiger to save the Phantom from being mauled by a tiger. So I think that sort of thing's really good.
On page 17, she kicks the gun out of the bad guy, Thetna's hand and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, so she certainly got some moxie of her own. The fantasy elements that you're talking about, to me, whether Mikkel has done it on purpose or not, there's hints of Scientology. That sort of religious undertone. That's the cult or whatever. He's talking about. There's a lot of talk about the evil in the world has come from the cosmos and alien forces that tried to invade millennia ago or whatever. And Thetna himself is quite excited because he's starting to get the evil out of his bloodline, and he's now level 3 and all of this sort of stuff. It really, I'm not a Scientologist and I've never done a lot of, but it feels like that sort of cultish religion to me. Which doesn't really tie into the third Phantom in the early 17th century. Where they're really cults and in the 1600s talking about levels and that sort of stuff. That doesn't sort of fit for mine. And that's why
this
again,
moment, but
exactly. Again, waiting to see what part 2 delivers.
So I think we're all on a wait and see.
Yes.
I will say this, Mikkel, because this is the second time we've seen a story from him. I think he's created 4 or 5 by the time this has been by the time this has been recorded. He does like to have the different elements all kind of woven together. It's not a simple A to point B, and it's a simple adventure. There is work involved in the script and stuff like that. So, it's a story that you sit down, you read, and you think about, okay, how's this going to work? Yeah, okay, and then you look at picking up little subtle clues and stuff like that, which is good. It's it's good to have a mixture of different types of Phantom stories. So I do enjoy his work. I do enjoy what we have seen from him so far.
Oh, look, I think it's a ridiculously tough gig writing a Phantom story, because you cannot possibly please your entire Phantom audience. Because there are some people who want the simplicity and the directness of the a middle-aged Lee Falk. There are some people who want the fantasy elements of the Team Fantomen stories. There are some people who want the detective elements. There are some people who want, there's so many different types of Phantom stories out there, and whichever one you read first probably is the one that you really like and the style that you really like. So, we've talked tonight about 5 different stories, plus, 6, I guess, if you talk about Heart of Darkness as well. We haven't Gaslight. We haven't mentioned Heart of Darkness yet. There's so many different types of Phantom stories. It's a hard gig to please your reader every time, even though we all love the character.
Yep, very good point. So talking about Heart of Darkness.
Yeah, right.
Did you read this one?
Flicked through it, mostly to see if the Phantom made an appearance, or we're still just dealing with Kit Walker. Don't think I saw the Phantom in his cowl. So, look, I like the art. Again, like the art. Other than that,
we're back in
the story. I'm not going to suddenly dip into it now.
I must admit, now this is the problem that we've talked about before. It says so on page 27. It says, "This arrived while you were away." Phantom says, "Another package, more pages from the Chronicle, but who is sending them and why?" Now, I've probably missed something, and then this is the problem that we've talked about before. Is I don't remember the Phantom receiving pages from someone who doesn't know of the Phantom's Chronicle. that has obviously gone missing from the Skull Cave.
What in
and so
Heart
I'm
of Darkness?
reading, yeah, in Heart of Darkness, because it's like another package. So that means he's received another package, more pages from the Chronicle, which means that this is not the first time that he's been receiving pages from the Chronicle about a past story that is obviously tied with this. So
maybe he's collecting for the P3. He's just getting pages sent randomly.
We'll talk about the P3. There's been some exciting elements about that.
Absolutely.
Well,
this is a photo that represents P3 at the moment.
But no, I just thought that was interesting, and I'm like, I don't remember that happening in a previous part, and it's like, and I think that's one of the problems that we're experiencing is that these little interesting subplots that I would normally find interesting, I am missing and or forgetting because the parts are so much separate from each other.
Yep.
Now, one other point before we do move on from the stories is in the message from in the forum letters, which is on page 33 and 34. There is a bunch of people, and we have put this up on Facebook as well, where people are starting to send in ideas on what they want to see. Now, if you have listened to our Sounds from Supernova podcast, which is episode 126 or 127, hint, nudge, nudge, Dudley was basically asking people to send in what they would like to see and stuff like that. So that has started to happen. So it's good to see that our podcast is people are listening to our podcast.
It was episode 123, so the furthest out you've been so far tonight. And so I think we can completely claim credit for all of these forum letters. It's all on the back of the podcast.
You better believe it. So that's all the fruit issues. What we are going to talk about now is the Frew Legacy Series #1, which is that beautiful book that Dan is holding up. I didn't know we were actually going to do this, so I don't have mine with me. Now, it is issues 1 to 3 of 1956 Phantom Adventurers, which are those beautiful things there. Now, we do have a video up on our website, which if you just search for, or if you go to our YouTube or whatever, you'll find it there. We go into great detail. We flick through it and stuff like that. I've reviewed it. Now, do you have anything Dan, you want to raise, either in response to the video or something that you feel that I've missed? And we can go from there.
It needs mentioning on the podcast because it's a pretty significant album to come out. Your video review is sensational.
It's beautiful.
It's quite thorough, the way you've gone through it, and clearly that's been well received at Frew as well, because in one of the, might have even been 1848, Dudley recommends in 1847 perhaps in 1847. Dudley recommends in his message from the publisher that people go to ChronicleChamber.com and check out your review, which I thought was very nice of him to be able to do that, and speaks to the quality of the review, or how glowing it was, at least, that Dudley should direct people to it. I would probably largely reiterate your points. It's a really well put together volume. The scans of the insides of the stories are really, really high resolution, and even though, the prose that has been put in here has not been retyped. It's scans of the original, and it's completely readable, very, very legible.
And the quality of the paper is good as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The quality of the paper is excellent.
You can feel it as you're flicking through it. I can hear the quality of the paper, that it's not thin butcher's paper. It's good quality, thick paper that is going to last longer than what the originals.
No, 100%. I've got two copies, obviously. One's a collector's copy and one's my reading copy, and I intend to make this available to my son to read and all the rest of it, and one that I hope becomes really well thumbed through and all the rest of it. But I feel like it's going to stand up irrespective because of the quality of the book. I ordered it through my local comic shop because I'm a cheapskate and doesn't want to pay for postage and handling. Shout out to Todd.
I did the same
Comics
as well.
Yep. Thank you very much for absorbing that for me. And he commented on the quality of it, and both of us agreed that at $20, it's a really great price point.
Yes,
for the book. There were a number of other people that had ordered it, and I'll be really interested to see how they receive it. And I feel like he's going to put this on the shelf. I don't want to dwell on things that you've already talked about in your YouTube video. I would say though that having I made a point of reading the first story. There's 3 books in here, and I guess as by way of reviewing the first story, what I would say is, and something that I feel like Dudley probably or Glenn, no one has written an introduction to this. What I feel like should have been said is that it does need to be read through the prism of the 1950s, because if you pick this up and think that it's a 2019 publication, then it probably doesn't stand up. And I'm not being disrespectful to Frew or anything there. And again, I've just opened that page randomly, as you can see. But that, and I'm holding this up to the camera if you're on YouTube, that depiction of the tribes people, and that's a pretty standard depiction where it's not flattering, the pictures that are drawn. And they do use a bit of racial stereotypes, which we probably know that we definitely do not want to see in stories that are published today. And I do feel like there probably could have been some sort of, not warning, but some sort of acknowledgement of that, perhaps.
Maybe even just like a message from the publisher, or like what could have been done is like a couple of paragraphs from either a collector or one of either, say, Glenn or Dudley, like what makes these so special is, these are special because, it was prose, it was an extenuation of Lee Falk stories. They are really, really hard to find. The cover art was really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as you read them, maybe look at it from a 1950s set of eyes where some of the images are maybe not. So, again, it could have just been a couple of paragraphs from a collector. There's plenty of people that would jump at the opportunity of writing a short essay that could be in a free publication.
Absolutely. And another example here, and this is not the artwork, but more the caption that's under there, and I don't expect anyone to actually be able to read that, but I'm looking at page. You could?
No, I couldn't.
Page 11, the caption under there, under the image says, "From the ancestral skull throne, the Phantom spoke to the terrified and trembling Bandar." Now, the Bandar are never terrified and trembling in front of the Phantom, as we know him, and we've been fans since the 1980s. He's the friend of the jungle people, and that is the tone of the story. But there's those sorts of language choices which are this is why people point to the Phantom and say, oh, well, that's a racist story or character or idea. And we know that it's not because of the evolution, but in the 1950s, this is the stage of evolution it was at.
So, no, I'll take your point. So,
and one more example, I just want to provide one more example because this amused me. And I'm going to read from a paragraph on page 10 now. So we've got 2 bad guys, and this is commando type, Germans who have escaped World War II. It's never mentioned that it's Germany and all the rest of it. And it's never mentioned that they're Nazis or that their leader was Hitler, but we know. Anyway, they've landed on a beach shortly after having drowned everyone else on the submarine. The paragraph reads, "Had they but known it, they were not the first survivors of tragedy to drag themselves wearily out of the surf and onto that stretch of sand." And this is the first time in the story we get the tropes of the Phantom story, the origin. Yeah. 300 years earlier, a tall, previously gay youth had reached the shore with the man who had murdered his father. The man was now dead. Now, the meaning of the word gay has changed since 1950s when this was written. So, that's another example, I guess, of the fact that it's a product of its time, and no matter the fantastic Chris Weil cover and the beautiful packaging and all the rest of it, you do need to remember when you actually read it that and view the stories that you know, I'm not going to just hand this to my 9-year-old. 10-year-old is now. I'm not just going to hand this to my 10-year-old in the same way that I would a Kid Phantom and say, hey, just enjoy this. This needs some conversation around it.
So, okay, a question. Now, I don't mind it personally, but we're looking at old classic stories from the 1950s, and then we've got a new cover by a very modern artist in Chris Well. Do they go together? Now, I asked this question because this was a question that was on our Facebook post by Harmony Gates, I believe it was.
I'm not sure. Because
now I personally don't see a problem with it, but I was just interested in basically what, you know, at top of your head, you know, without thinking about, without any prior warning.
Question without notice.
Put on the spot.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I would say in that instance, because I think of the different expectations that you get when you pick this up and you see this modern interpretation. You go, oh, this is, and because there's no warning or editor's note or whatever, you pick up pretty quickly exactly what it is, and the back cover, the blurb on the back cover, I guess, it serves as that editor's note. It doesn't highlight what I've just spoken about. It does mention, it doesn't even give a date on the back there. It does explain where they've come from. And where are there any dates given for these issues? There are. An adaptation of the 1944, 1945, 1943 story. So those things are in there. But no, probably not. Just because, and I know you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but just because the cover is so remarkably
modern look,
content of the insides.
Yeah.
But that said,
it was just I must admit I've never. It was just that there was a question that was raised by someone on Facebook, and I thought, oh, that's a good point. I'll have to remember and raise that because I didn't even mention that on the video review. It did not come across in the,
and
so
that's why you need me on the podcast to think of these things.
You didn't think of it though.
No, but I responded to the question, and that's the important part.
Okay. A participation award, is that what you're after?
If you wouldn't mind, just add it to my package, send it over.
Okay, so that is all of our Frew reviews, and I could tell that probably took about an hour, maybe.
I've been time-stamping irregularly as we go.
And then now what we're going to do is we're going to get a review by Mikkel, and he has done a video of this as well. So like I said before, if you wanted to, so he's got four comics to do, and I can tell you right now, it is not going to take an hour. It's going to take probably about 1/10 of that. So over to you, Mikkel, and again, thanks, buddy.
Time for another Fantomen review. And today I have lots of issues. 3 Swedish issues, where one is a double issue and the new Norwegian issue. So let's get started. The first one out is number 16 of 2019. It features a great cover by Henrik Sahlström, in my opinion. It's light, the faces look natural, and it includes a poster of last year's best cover. Then we have the main story, Sandal Singh, Den gyllene burens fånge. That would translate to Sandal Singh, the prisoner of the golden cage. I'm not sure if that translates, but at least in Swedish there is this saying of being a prisoner in a golden cage that is living a luxury life, but you're not free to do what you want, like leave. You just have to stay there even though you live quite good standard. This is a origin story for Sandal Singh, and it's written by Claes Remerti, and the art is split by Johan Boy and Rafael Ruiz and Coral Martinez. But unlike the Jam story Blood Drain, this was not intended to be a joint venture. From my understanding, one of the artists had some personal problems that led him not being able to finish in time, so the second half got done by the other two. And this is of course not ideal, but it's not the end of the world. As I said earlier, maybe I enjoy this story a lot because it's nice to know a bit about Sandal Singh's origin. Yeah, it's actually quite in the middle of the story where you can see 12 pages done by one artist, and then the last 12 pages or last 14 pages is done by the second artist. Next up is 17 of 2019. Again, a great cover by Henrik Sahlström. Not much to say. It's the 20 seconds phantoms running against a flaming skull or something like that. The story is called Kampen mot Singh, Gatlopp med döden. And that would translate to the fight against Singh, Death's Gauntlet. And in this case it's the gauntlet like the punishment, not the glove. The script is written by Claes Remerti and the art is done by Janus Orden. And as I've said in earlier reviews, that I really like this Janus Orden, his style. And I can't find one single panel that I don't think is beautiful, and it's like the shadows are really nice, but that's my personal view at least. And I also said in earlier reviews that I really enjoyed this 20-second Phantom stories, but this had quite a bit of an issue for me, or me and my son, because it's been almost half a year since the second part, and this is the third part. And there's so many separate threads in this story, so it's quite hard to keep track of it all. But I love these stories, and once the fourth is out, I'm gonna reread them in order, and then probably everything fits together. And I really hope the concluding one is soon, so we don't have to wait 5-6 months again. But like I said, good issue. Yeah, that's all about that one. Now we have the last Swedish issue, and that's a double issue, number 1819 of 2019. And it also has a great cover from Henrik Sahlström. Feels like I'm repeating myself. Even though you can't see the Phantom's costume here, it really popped in the newsstand, I would say. And when I saw it on Facebook, I felt like, oh, I want this now, because I didn't get it the same day as everyone else. The main story, the new Team Fantomen story, is called Döden i Carpathia. It would be Death in Carpathia, where they've been earlier. And it's written by Mikael Sol, and also art from Janus Orden that made the last issue as well. And it starts with Mikael talking a bit about where he got his influences for this story. It is a mystery story with some mild horror influences. I like the story, but if I could change one thing, it's like after the mystery happened, I would have wanted one panel of the interior so I could have figured out what happened for myself and not getting it pushed from the the conclusion of the story. And I think I like Mikael Sol's stories a lot, just like I liked Ulf Granberg's stories a lot. Maybe it's something with being an editor and writing stories that they get this break from the administrative work and do something more more creative part, and maybe that makes them. I mean, I like lots of different art writers, but I don't know what I'm trying to say. But maybe the editors enjoy writing more, but maybe I'm totally wrong about that. So the second part of this double issue is called the Duck Pirates, not ducks, but duck, and that's an quite old, it's almost 20 years old daily story, and it's about the 6th, 7th and 21st Phantom, how they tackle the duck pirates in different ways, and it's apparently, yeah, I think that the whole story feels like a resume. It's nothing that happens now, it's always past tense, like this happened and that happened, right until the end. I thought it was not great, but the last few panels got me to like it a bit more, so it gets my approval anyways. And it was written by Lee Falk and art by George Olsen and Keith Williams. I don't think this have been reviewed by the Chronicle Chambers earlier, since they haven't reviewed that long, but I might be wrong. And that's all of the Swedish stories. This brings us to the new Norwegian album, and Phantom is dead. Long live the Phantom. So after the Fantomet got cancelled, this is what rises up in its ashes, and it's a bit bigger and a bit thicker. It has 4 Phantom stories and no side stories or anything, and I can go right through it. The first story is also what's on the cover. It's the Butterfly Man that was done by Team Fantomen, written by Claes Remerti and art by Cesar Spatari, and it was very well received in Sweden when it came. It won best cover that year, and the story won, not won, but it got the runner-up in best story. I, however, is on the personal belief that I'm not afraid of butterflies, and I think the cover looks great, but the story, it's okay, but not as good as everyone else thinks. That's, again, my personal opinion. This story was reviewed by Chronicle Chambers, but I could not find the episode. Maybe you guys can help me out after I finish talking about the rest of the stories. And then the second story in this album is The Rat Must Die, and it's a daily story. Sunday story. And I thought this was pretty funny. I really liked the interaction with the rat and the Phantom, and it reminds me of really old stories. I mean, it has the right vibes. And it's done by Tony DePaul and Jeff Weigel. The third story is another Team Fantomen story, The Pit of Doom, that I have reviewed earlier. I loved it. If you don't remember, I really love the Waterworld setting. It's by Karlström, Carling, Ruiz, and Martinez. And the final story is when Phantom visit Norway, and it's taken from the second Phantom Strikes. And it also has this article about how it come that the Phantom is in Norway, and why he meets Varg, who is a really famous detective story here in the Nordics. And then it's the story, and that's also great. This has been reviewed by the Chronicle Chambers on the web, in text form, that is, that you can find on the Chronicle Chambers homepage. and it's called The Masks of the Phantom, and it's written by Arild Vernes and Mike Collins, and the assist from Knut Robert Knudsen, and the art is done by Mike Collins. And overall I think this approach with 4 Phantom adventures and nothing else, and they can pick whatever stories they want, was a great thing for the Norwegians. I mean, of course they probably still wanted the comic book, but I think this is great, and I hope this comes out at least for a year. That would be great. And that's all from here in the Nordics. Happy Fantoming.
All right. Thank you for that. And now for those who are listening to it, Mikkel did review the Fantomet #1 issue, which is the Norwegian issue. Now, there has been a bit of a delay in getting that review to us, because basically we put it out there trying to get some reviews from some Norwegian listeners, and none of them wanted to review their special Norwegian comic, so we got a Swede to do it. So I appreciate that, Mikkel. And if there's anyone out there that wants to step up and do what Mikkel does for their country's comics, same as we're also after ones for the Brazilian issues that are coming out as well. For Mythos, if you want to do that, please drop us a line, and we would love to be able to include your reviews with our podcast. Well, the listeners will. I would love it. Dan, who has to edit it, might grumble a little bit more, but we'll get over
it's going to be interesting to see how you respond now that you've got to start patching videos together.
That's why I said at the beginning, do we need to do a video of this? Okay, so that's all of our comics and news. So what we'll do is we'll quickly do the outro, and then how long has it been, the podcast?
Yeah, a couple of hours.
So close to 2 hours, so about normal.
Yep.
Okay. So first of all, we want to give a Patreon shout out to our newest Patreon, Anthony Gillies. We appreciate your donation and your support. As we discussed 2 hours ago, we do have a thing called Patreon, and Patreon is basically a place where you can support us, which helps us pay for things we do, like video editing software, web space, podcast space, all of that type of stuff that all costs money. Basically, it means it doesn't come out of our pocket, which means we don't get in trouble from our wives. Yous help us, which means we have a happy wife, which means we get to do more podcasts. So as one of the rewards for the Patreon, we have a Phantom Preservation project. Now, I'm very, very excited that we have, this past week, we've received about 4 to 6 kilos. Yes, kilos.
You know you're doing well when you're measuring your documents by kilograms.
We've received 4 to 6 kilos of newspaper clippings, magazines, and stuff of the Phantom from as far back as the 80s to a couple of years ago. So that's 30 years of newspaper clippings from around Australia, but also New Zealand, USA, and there's been a couple of others as well. So pretty exciting. This has been donated to us from a Phantom collector who, he acquired it during an estate sale, and he knew that basically it will be good for us to have it, to be able to put it as Phantom preservation. So,
and fair to say that the collector was fastidious, and seems to have just hoarded, in the most positive sense of that word, in the way that every person who's listening 2 and a bit hours into a Phantom podcast will appreciate someone who's hoarded this stuff. We feel so privilege to be able to digitally archive that for people in a way that they can access without taking up boxes and boxes and kilos of storage in their house.
So a little bit of a snapshot. So we'll have the first snippet of that uploaded on Fantomen Preservation Project within probably the next couple of weeks. That's going to be Dan's job once he edits these.
Late September is the plan. Yep.
So before the end of September.
No, I didn't say that. Could be early October.
Okay, so in a couple of weeks' time.
Yep.
To a month's time.
Yeah.
So just
by Christmas, can I say by Christmas?
No, by Christmas I want at least
of 2021.
No, by Christmas I'm wanting it. We need to get back to the once a month.
Yeah.
So Fantomen Preservation Project will be getting updated once a month. We've had a little bit of a break just while we've been sorting out this collection, and we've got the collection sorted. We've started digitizing some of it, so we're going to get back to it. So in the last 3 days, I think I've scanned close to 70 newspaper articles, including ones from there was one Australian newspaper from Defenders of the Earth. There's been Phantom movie reviews from around the world, and there's also been a whole heap of newspaper articles and clippings from Lee Falk when he passed away in early 1999 as well. So there's a lot of cool stuff there. I've been enjoying reading it. I've been going through it, and I've been going, no, stop reading it. You can read it later. Just digitize it. So so the Fantomen Preservation Project is a level. If you donate to us $5 or more, you get access to that, and it's very, very huge collection. It's going to be continue to get huge because I'm maybe a quarter of the way through digitizing the stuff, if that. So you can find out more about that on our website. You can get access to a free index, which Dan has painstakingly put together. It's about 4 or 5 pages long of a list of what we've got on there. There's videos, there's game stuff, there's newspaper articles, magazines, newsletters from fan clubs, and the list goes on and on and on and on. Now, of course, you can access us and follow us on our website, which is ChronicleChamber.com. You can email us if you've got any monkey mail messages you want us to discuss on the podcast. You can do that at chroniclechamber@gmail.com. Our social media links is Facebook, chroniclechamber.com, and then we're also admins on Phantom Collector Group. Twitter is @ChronicleTweets, and Instagram is @ChronicleChamber. And then, of course, you can subscribe to us on iTunes or via apps like Podbean, Play FM, Castbox, etc., etc. So, as we finish, is there anything you absolutely need to say? Otherwise, you will not be able to sleep.
Mate, I looked at the run sheet and I thought, yes, there's 5 comics, but there's not a lot of news. We should knock this over in about 80 minutes, I thought. What was I thinking?
What were you thinking?
I'm going to be quiet now and let everyone get back to... Well, look, at least...
It's only taken him 2 hours to say that he's going to be quiet.
From my point of view, I listen to a lot of football podcasts, and we're now going into the off-season, so I'm actually looking forward to some quite long Phantom podcasts, and I hope everyone else is too.
So, from myself... Dan, thank you for joining us. And fans, happy Fantoming.
Yep, happy Fantoming, everybody.
See you guys.
500 years ago, he washed ashore the sole survivor of a shipwreck. And upon the skull of the man who killed his dad, he said, I'm mad, I must eradicate piracy, injustice and cruelty, and all my sons will follow me, so evildoers will believe that this man cannot die. The Phantom, the ghost who walks. The Phantom, enemies beware. The Phantom's always there, but you won't find the Phantom. He finds